Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Friday, November the 22nd. I am your host, JT Ruhnke. You can follow me on X at JT_Ruhnke. Once again, I am joined by my lovely co-host here on the Hot Read Happy Hour Friday, Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief over on Sobros Network, 1/3 of the Football and Other F Words podcast, and co-writer over at stackingtheinbox.com. Stoney, how are you doing on this Friday, my friend?
Pretty good little Friday going here, JT. I've got a little time off from the day job, so I'm just kind of enjoying a little bit of rest and relaxation. I think this is like the fourth different location that I've come to you guys live from in the past month or so, but this is the house we moved into after the log cabin. We got everything out of that house. Now we're in this one, and now I'm starting to help. I painted some numbers on the front of the building, like just doing a couple things around the house, just having a nice leisurely little Friday, watching some Houston Texans tape. It's been great.
Yeah, can't complain with that. At least you're not in the dungeon anymore. At least there is some light behind you.
Yeah.
This is an interesting game. You talk about watching the Houston Texans tape. I think this is going to be a very interesting game. And if you want to enjoy the game like we will on Sunday, you got to go over to our wonderful sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. Thank you for sponsoring the show. If you have been around the 440 Podcast Network here for quite a while, you know them pretty well. If not, we're happy to introduce you. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show. But before we get into all that Houston Texans, the great debate of can the Titans actually, stand their ground in this game. I want to start off with getting your thoughts on a certain take I have brewing here, and that take is: the Titans go and get Daniel Jones? I feel like I've seen this people like half joking, half not on this take. I feel like, Daniel Jones does get released today from the New York Giants, but at the end of the day, I saw people saying he could be a serviceable backup or something, but I get the feeling that Daniel Jones isn't wanting to be in the backup role anywhere, and I don't think he's a great fit for the Titans. But still, do you think that he could, save the Titans season this year?
I was really hoping you wouldn't bring Daniel Jones up on this show because I don't want to reveal my honest opinions about Daniel Jones because they're going to drag me through the streets for it. But I kind of feel like he gets a bad rap. I think he's played some good football before. I don't think the Giants did him any favors with the coaching turnover, the lack of weapons to throw to. The offensive line has been atrocious. Not saying that things would be much better in Tennessee, but I feel like I've got a higher opinion of Daniel Jones than a lot of people do. And I don't think it would be the end of the world if this quarterback room ends up being Will Levis and Daniel Jones heading into 2025. I'm just being honest. I pride myself on being authentic, transparent with our audience. I don't think it would be the end of the world if those were the two Titans quarterbacks going into next season.
That's honestly not the response I thought I was going to get out of you there.
Well,
so that one's it's a little surprising to me.
It's not so much that Daniel Jones and Will Levis are good. It's just this idea that I've talked about. It's kind of picking up a little bit of steam, is that this draft class is not very good. There are not a lot of options in free agency unless you trade for a Matthew Stafford or something like that and take on that contract. I don't know that the quarterback situation is going to be solved this offseason. So you might have to kind of patchwork another quarterback room together to get you through to another player acquisition cycle. And nobody wants to hear that because it is the darkest timeline. But in a perfect world, Will Levis just continues on the trajectory to improvement that he's on right now. And we're not even worried about the quarterback anymore. But I'm just saying, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we could see a quarterback room like Levis and Jones. Maybe not necessarily those two players, but I won't be surprised if that's what the Titans end up rolling with next season.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we have some people here in the comments who, like Eddie, who joins us here, saying Danny Dimes as a long-term backup. He's at least intrigued. And if you want to get in on the discussion, if you're watching over on Twitter or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channel, where you can join the conversation like Zach and Jake and Eddie and Lewis and all these wonderful people over here saying, Zach basically saying, we have Danny Dimes at home already, which I think is pretty funny. Jake in the comments here saying, every time a Titans media member talks about Dimes and Angel loses his wings, we can stop with that discussion, because I think that's one down the road, because as we've learned over the past 2 weeks, there's a little bit of intrigue with a guy like Will Levis. And, I think, we've talked about over the last 2 weeks, okay, the Chargers, a good defense. Let's see what Will Levis can be in his return as the starter. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes in that game, but still they weren't able to put up much of an offensive effort. And then they go at home and play Minnesota, one of the best defenses right now in the league. And we were telling ourselves, you have to, if you're Will Levis, you have to put together a pretty decent game here if we want to get back in on the he could be something train. And I think he did that well enough. He could have had another 50-yard touchdown in his belt in that game, but still, even if that touchdown ends up happening, they end up with 17 or 20 points. We're still stuck here below the 20-point mark, which is a big problem for a team and is a big problem for a quarterback who, if you want him to be your long-term future, you have to score more than 20 points. And so now is the next test, which is against the Houston team, which certainly, if nothing else, means a lot to the organization as a whole. And so the Tennessee Titans will be headed to play the Texans. And as Eddie says here in the comments, Sinkers about to get me through this game Sunday, because, oh boy, it has not looked great for the Titans. They're on a historical run right now. I found this stat earlier today. The Titans are 1-9 against the spread this season. It's the worst record in the NFL, and it's not just the worst record in the NFL this season. It is the worst mark for any team through 11 weeks since the 2007 Ravens, and just the second 1-9 against the spread start through 11 weeks in the last 20 years. Of course, Will Levis's inability to cover the second half spread also really does not help him there, but just kind of gives you another angle as to what this season really has been for the Tennessee Titans, I would say. But more on them later from a betting perspective. But I do think that, we've talked about for weeks on end now, the Titans, even if they are 2-8, it really doesn't feel like this team has checked out in any sense. Hell, it really does feel like the players have rallied behind their coach, Brian Callahan, after every single gut punch. I mean, even last week, we talked about him after blowing up on the sideline. Players were using that as motivation. Players were ready to go to battle for their head coach. Like this guy who has lost the locker room. And so, when you see Brian Callahan earlier in the week say that he understands the historical context of a trip for the Titans back to Houston and how it means more for some, hint, hint, the owner, it's the same approach for him as against any division team, but specifically for the players who have been here, like Jeffrey Simmons, like Harold Landry, like an NWI, like a Roger McCreary, like an Amani Hogan, the guys who have been here through thick and thin over the last 2.5 or so years. Like, I feel like that's something that is going to build on each other throughout the week. And so I do ask you, and I think this is something that we've talked about behind closed doors, the Titans could be a sneaky team to be on spoiler watch this week. I think you talk about a team that we've continued to say that the things underneath the surface, as Brian Callahan has said, and also we watching the tape, we've started to see this team get really close to putting it all together. And we've said over the last week and a half, I'm still wouldn't be surprised if this Titans team comes out and really shocks a lot of people by winning a game they shouldn't. And if there's any time to win a game that they shouldn't, it's in front of your owner, your controlling owner, Amy Adams Strunk, in where she lives in Houston, against the team, that carries so much history. and plays a big role into how she views her own team sometimes. And so I think that added extra motivation feels like it could be a sneaky spot where the Titans could look to flip the script, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a win in Houston probably goes a long way to buy some goodwill for this regime in the eyes of Amy Adams Strunk as well. This probably is a deeply personal game for her, one that she wants to win. And listen, I go back and forth on this one, JT, because I do think that multiple things are true when you talk about this Houston Texans team. I think they probably aren't playing up to their expectations. I think it's possible this team could easily have a much worse record than it has right now. But the flip side of that is the actual matchups. And you look at where the Texans are strong versus where the Titans are weak. And I think several of those boxes you do check in favor of the Houston Texans still. But there is a path for an upset here. And we'll kind of get into the schematics of this throughout the show. But I do think that there is a matchup or two that the Titans can take advantage of, especially if things continue to click the way that they have in the last two games, second half against the Chargers, removed from that. So I do think this is a big game. I still am of the opinion that you have this slate of games, two against the Texans. You have this game against the Commanders coming up. You have the Bengals on the schedule as well, that the Titans are going to be underdogs in all of these games. And I still think that the Titans are capable of surprising one of these teams. And I think if they do so, it will buy a lot of goodwill with the owner, but also the fan base that is kind of growing a little weary of Brian Callahan and the staff and the constant losing. So I think they're kind of due for one of these types of wins. And I think that it feels like this offense specifically is getting closer to turning a corner. And if you get a solid performance from your defense again, and if your special teams just doesn't screw up completely, I think you can put together another complete performance like they did against the Vikings, and they're going to upset one of these teams. If it happens to be the team in Houston, then man, that's just gravy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't want to get too positive saying that this is for sure, because I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of fans this week, from what I've seen, have been riding high on this game was kind of robbed from us. And it doesn't feel like an actual, another loss for the Titans after that Minnesota game. And there very much is a possibility that, we'll talk about the matchups here, but that once again, just like the Minnesota game, this team the Houston Texans being just simply outmatches this Tennessee Titans game on paper from basically every single position. And that's not something we probably would have said to be going into the year, but you look at the injuries, you look at what's happened over the past couple of weeks, and it really does feel like, this Houston team, who still is, in control of the division pretty comfortably, is getting close to playing some of their best football. But I think there are some things here that I've seen over the past couple of weeks that show me that, this Houston team is not unbeatable. And so that's what I want to talk about as a big portion of our show today. What are the biggest things the Titans have to do right in terms of, putting together a full game, something they continue not to be able to do? And I think that the number one thing this week is on offense, and it's getting the ball out quick. There's been a lot of talk about how this team, when you specifically look at the Titans, they're playing, they're playing a lot of down and distances. I believe we were looking up this stat yesterday in the media room, and they have, I believe, on the season, somewhere in the ballpark of 60 to 65 third and long downs this season so far. And you're looking against a team like the Houston Texans, and I don't have the stats, but all you need to know is that Nick Holtz told us it was like a horror movie when you talk about trying to call the offense against this Houston defense when you are behind the sticks. And so I'm inclined to believe that if the offensive coordinator thinks that this defense can be a horror movie for your offense, that's not a position you really want to be in this game. And so for me, it's getting the ball out quick, being super efficient with your first and second downs. I mean, as confident as I am that they can do that, you also hear Nick Holt yesterday talk about, hey, well, if we're running it on first down, we want to get to you want to get to like 2nd and 6. Like we want to get 4 yards on there, and then we feel good. And I was joking yesterday in the media room, but it feels like this team is telling you this week that if they don't get to like a 2nd and 6 or like a 3rd and 5, you might as well just get up, go to the bathroom, get your popcorn, do whatever, because it feels like this team has no confidence whatsoever in themselves to convert some of these that we've seen them convert the past couple of weeks. And so I feel like that's a big time thing. Is that something that when you're looking at the film, that's one of the biggest things you're noticing right now with this team?
Yeah, it is just, it's stupid how deep this Texans defensive front is. I mean, it's been no Will Anderson, no problem so far. You look at guys like Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry, even Derek Barnett having a solid year. They don't fool you a whole lot. This is a 4-man front. This is a deep stable of pass rushers that penetrates against the run, that gets to the quarterback. And it's kind of crazy, man. Like the Houston Texans defense, 28th in disguise rate. So you look at both sides of the coin. Theoretically, you think for an efficient offensive performance, for Levis getting the ball out quickly, even maybe in the run game, like you're thinking what you see is what you get. So it should be a little easier for Levis to process, to read the defense and make decisions off of that. But it really doesn't matter if that defensive front is just washing over your offensive line like a tidal wave. And that's really the strength of their defense. Their corners play super aggressive. They play up close. There's going to be opportunities for big plays if the protection can hold and these wide receivers can get behind the Texans secondary. But the key to their whole defense right now, it's just dudes, man. It is just dudes. They have the horses to run this thing where it doesn't matter if you get the ball out quickly. They're gonna get to you, and they're gonna affect the quarterback whether they're actually sacking Will Levis or not. I imagine that the pressure is going to be immense. So I think that is one of the keys here. Can you run into this front? Can you have your guys, Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham, who have been playing pretty well as of late? Can they open up holes, and can you run to the left side right into the teeth of this pass rush? Can guys separate quickly enough against the aggressive corners that are going to be playing a lot of press man? Can they separate quickly enough for those windows to open up for Levis to get the ball out quickly enough? And it's asking a lot, right? Like I'm sitting here saying, like, if everything's perfect, they can move the ball. But there is a path to that if the offense operates efficiently within that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. And if you have any, insights and takes about this game, feel free to join us here in the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports comment section, like Zach and Lewis, who apparently, he says, "Screw you, Stoney. I don't know what you did to him," but
he thinks he said that I blocked his comments. I don't have the controls here, buddy.
I don't think anybody's blocking him there. But
I don't know.
If you have any takes on this game, please let us know here in the comments section. But I do think that you are right. If there is one, well, first of all, they do have dudes, and some of those dudes happen to be former Titans who, we'll get to the offensive line versus the Texans defensive line here shortly, but some guys who know some of your mannerisms when going up against them because they went up against you every single day in practice last year, which is, I think, is something it's not nothing, I think. But I think if there's one spot in this defense that we've seen over the past couple of weeks that you can really attack this Houston Texans team, it's in the explosives. It's in the big time plays. I mean, we saw in the Dallas game last week against Houston versus the Cowboys, we saw Kevontae Turpin absolutely just kind of burn past a couple of these. They play a good secondary, but once again, they have guys like Kamari Lassiter, like a Jalen Petrie, not the fastest guys in the world. Like, if you have speed, there's ability for you to really make explosive plays. And that's something that the Texans team has kind of allowed because, once again, they're so focused on getting to you up front that it feels like, they have so much confidence in their front line to get to you versus, trying to take away a bunch of looks. And so I asked Nick Holtz earlier this week, I guess technically yesterday, about, this Houston Texans defense is pretty gettable in the explosive category. Will Levis has been pretty good at those explosive plays in the past couple of weeks. But, even though the explosives are one thing, you still are asking Will Levis to be more consistent in the mundane types of throws and the types of plays that you need from him. And so what's the challenge of trying to kind of master that mundane part of this game? Well, also trying to know that you can definitely take the top off this defense and make those big time plays. And so here's what he had to say on that.
Recognizing the looks that when those shots are there, that's what he did even on the one that got called back to Calvin on the third down on the illegal formation. He knew the look, he knew exactly where he wanted to go, he knew how they were going to buzz out. They kind of busted their coverage a little bit. We'll get to throw it down. He knew he was going. So when those shots are there, we got to hit him. The second thing with this team like this and these 4-down jet rush teams is it is a foot race between the receiver to get to his spot against the defensive line. So, that's where we really got to measure in what shots were taken, because their DBs know that they've got a great pass rush and that they're coming up the field. And so that's kind of feel like when they haven't gotten home, those guys have been guessing, squatting, and those are where a lot of those explosives have come. So it's that balance of, okay, can we beat their pass rush? Can our receivers beat their pass rush down the field?
Yeah, I think, what he says there, I think it's the biggest thing this week, the foot race that is going to happen between, the offensive line's ability to protect for Will Levis and, Calvin Ridley, NWI, Tyler Boyd, these guys to get to their spots on the field. And so once again, tying that back into what we were talking about before, if you're finding yourselves in beyond the sticks and in 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, things like that, you're probably not going to have the best time out there. And that's something that we asked Will Levis's quarterback coach, Bo Hardegree, yesterday about, kind of trying to mitigate those down and distances in their game against Houston this week. And so here's what he had to say about that.
We've got to, stay ahead of the sticks, not be in 3rd and long situations or kind of get back on track situations. That's just being consistent on 1st down and 2nd down. So that's very, it's a point of interest for sure.
Yeah. And so, I think that's the biggest emphasis right now is making sure that the time on task on 1st and 2nd downs are the main thing here. And so is that by way of trying to maybe get this Titans running attack maybe back up and running? I know over the past 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen a pretty decent dip in the production for guys like Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears, of course, will be out this week with a concussion, so you'll probably get a healthy dosage of Tony Pollard. And it's not like this Houston team is unbeatable when it comes to the run, but you have to get creative in the ways I think that you have to get after them. Would you say so, Stoney?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the encouraging thing is I think you can even just go back to last week against the Dallas Cowboys. There were moments when the Cowboys offense ran similar route concepts to what the Titans run a lot of. And it's, stressing a guy deep. I don't know if you necessarily call them clear out routes, but a route going deep that pulls the safety back and then a route underneath it that breaks inside or outside. And those plays were open for the Cowboys. You saw Cooper Rush unable to navigate the pass rush, uncomfortable in the pocket. He couldn't hit those throws. So you watch stuff like that and you think, okay, so this stuff's on tape where these route concepts are working against this defense. Another thing, I was kind of surprised to see, I know the reputation precedes the Houston Texans and how they are not fooling anybody. What you see is what you get with this defensive front and this coverage. But I was still surprised at the number of times that they lined up, corners right on the line of scrimmage, press man coverage on the outside, 4-man rush on the inside, linebackers up close to fill gaps, single high safety. In those situations, again, the pass rush gets home, quarterbacks aren't able to hit those throws, but you can see massive windows opening up for a guy like Calvin Ridley, whose speed off the line, out of his release, getting behind that secondary. When you see those moments, and again, I come back to this idea that it should be a little easier to read. Will Levis should go to the line of scrimmage and identify, hey, this is single high coverage. We got guys bumping at the line of scrimmage out here. I know I can throw this up to Ridley down the field and create an explosive. To identify those, to me, on offense is your biggest path to not just being efficient on offense, but to really scoring points and really, really lighten some fireworks in this game. And that gives them a good chance to win. So I do think that matchup is there, and it's encouraging to hear this as a point of emphasis for the Titans coaches this week.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it's not like, even with that, if those lanes become open, you still have to honor what Derek Stingley can do and what he's doing right now at such a young age and in the middle of this season. I mean, among quarterbacks, this is a fun stat I found. Among quarterbacks who've been targeted at least 50 times, Derek Stingley Jr. has allowed the lowest completion percentage, which is at 47.5%, and the fewest yards per target, 5.5 yards in that game. So, it's pretty easy to see that. I think we'll see a lot of Stingley versus Calvin Ridley, who we talked to yesterday. And Calvin Ridley said, when he's going up against a guy like that, he doesn't feel any nerves or anything like that because he respects the hell out of his game right now and at the level he's playing. But he did call him one of those guys that it's on his list of guys that he can go toe to toe with. So
JT,
it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you keep up with Field Vision's Havoc rating, but it's another stat, another metric analytics out there that I wanted to mention on this show. It is, in their own words, a model that calculates individual player impact on a play-by-play basis. It's basically like a scoring algorithm. Players get points based on their production, but this metric does account for scheme. So it's not just raw interceptions, tackles, forced fumbles, that sort of thing, but they account for basically doing your job within the confines of your scheme, and it measures how big of an impact you have on the rest of your defense. Number one in the NFL in Field Vision's Havoc rating for 2024, Derek Stingley with a rating of 90.28. And they even say in their description of what the stat is, anything above a 90 is really, really good. And he is the only cornerback in the NFL that is above that mark right now for Field Vision's Havoc rating. So just another metric that we can use, a breadcrumb that we can follow the larger trail of. Derek Stingley's having a really good 2024, and he's just developing into a really good cornerback.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And Jake in the comments, with this creating explosives, he maybe tongue in cheek says the Titans and explosives usually aren't mentioned in the same sentence unless you refer to the diarrhea they put on the field Sunday. And will it be another one of those? I do not know, but regardless, you have to enjoy the diarrhea they put out there with our friends over at Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. Sinkers Beverages, of course, has been serving the East Nashville community for over 40 years. They are a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year. And it's not hard to see why, because they simply have the best selection of beer, wine, and spirits I have ever seen. And when stepping foot into a liquor store like that, when you go in there, you also have to sign up for their in-crowd for special allocation events like their holiday one where they, if you are a loyal customer, they help you out and find some of the harder to find items out there for your holiday season, spending it with friends and family. They also do, special tastings every other week or so. Those are the types of things that you can only be a part of if you join their in-crowd. You got to give them a follow on social media at SinkersBev on X and sinkers.nashville on Instagram. And if you can't make it out there, don't worry. They deliver the booze to you. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats, and they drive so you can drink responsibly. If you're in the Hendersonville area, you got to check out their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages, who have been serving that location for over 50 years. That's 90 years combined of local service, helping out local businesses and the local people like you. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show. Okay, Stoney, this talk about Calvin Ridley and Derek Stingley and the how good the offense can be on Sunday really won't matter if the protection cannot hold up against this front four that they really like to rush in the things they like to do there. And as Zach puts in the comments here, he says Daniil Hunter versus NPF has me doing the 1,000-yard stare, and it's not hard to see why, because protecting against this Houston front, it's once again going to be the Nicholas Petit-Frere show. And I wrote yesterday on Stacking the Inbox about how the frustration. Did I go maybe a step too far? Like, comparing Bill Callahan to the NFL's version of a modern day Sisyphus, maybe, as someone who's so good at what they do, doesn't matter how good they are, because if they're only as good as the top potential of what they're working with. And we've seen already this year, you can throw an NPF, a Leroy Watson, a John Ojukwu, a Isaiah Prince, a Jalen Duncan, any of these guys out there, and it just doesn't seem to work. But I mean, once again, it seems like at least NPF will be getting the start. Isaiah Prince, I would probably expect, unless they've changed their philosophy on this whole rotation thing, I would expect him to also get some goes out. Nice. I would expect. It's really interesting because I'm interested to see what you think of this, because even they give NPF the start, but I believe they gave NPF the start last week as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, he only played 40% of the offensive right tackle snaps. Like, I don't know how to quantify that in this certain situation right now. Stoney, after reviewing the tape, what did you see from those two that maybe gives you hope that this is more than just NPF getting the first, the first reps and then switching back out?
I mean, really nothing. If you just want an honest answer to the question, we're in dire straits, boys. We got some trouble on our hands with this right tackle spot, because they can't settle on a guy. And I don't think it's necessarily like, I don't think it's necessarily that any one guy is doing well enough in practice to warrant getting the start. I think they're literally just rotating guys until somebody steps up and takes command of the position. And nobody's done it yet to their liking anyway. I felt like, man, with Nicholas Petit-Frere, the lack of anchor has been something that's plagued him all season. There's just not a lot of power to his game. But then I also noticed against the Minnesota Vikings and that defensive front, they like to fly around. Those safeties come up and fly around. Ivan Pace is flying around. You're having to deal with a lot of lateral movement against that defense. And there were moments when NPF was playing like he was going through a rep in practice, like learning, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do when you're going up against air and you don't have anything to react to. And when you're getting those live rounds in real games and those people are moving around side to side, if you don't adjust, you're just going to get abused. And it felt like that's what was going on with NPF. There were several times I noticed, like, okay, he's getting to a spot, but then the guy's just cutting inside and he's still got his hands out in front of him, like the guy's in front of him. And it's just inexplicable, man. It just really seems like a situation where I don't know if it's him being in his own head or what, but there's just not there's not a lot of anchor there. There's not a lot of power there. With Isaiah Prince, it was a similar issue, man. I mean, look at the way he's built is like a jacked up tight end. Like, he's not built like a pot-bellied offensive tackle that plays with a lot of power. Maybe his footwork, his speed, his agility is pretty good, but man, I saw somebody hit a long arm on him, just a jab, not even an extension and a hold and a drive, not that type of play, but just like, I'm going to jab you, I'm going to get that arm out, hits him right in the chest, and he just falls down on his ass. Like, it's not good. I like none of these guys that they're trying seem to have any sort of real anchor in pass protection. And that's a problem. It's directly leading to Will Levis facing pressure, getting sacks, and indirectly making mistakes because the whole process is rushed. So I don't know that there's anything on tape that makes you feel encouraged about where the right tackle spot is heading. I think Leroy Watson has probably been the best guy out of all of them that they've tried, but he's hurt. and he can't see the field. So they just have to do what they got to do. And who knows, maybe in a week or so, there's another warm body that they've acquired that they can just throw into the rotation and see if he can win the job. But nobody's stepping up and claiming it. And that's just where they're at. That's the reality of the position right now.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. However, like, as much as you want to say it's dire straits, when I was writing about this yesterday, it certainly seems like Bill Callahan is such an interesting person to talk to. It feels like he really is not that concerned about the position, which I think is pretty crazy. And so
funny. Yeah.
I've compiled a couple of clips just talking about, first of all, the way he's self-scouted his first year here. And I think there's a lot of interesting nuggets to go off of in a couple of these clips. So we'll talk about the first one here, which is indeed Bill Callahan. It's kind of him self-scouting, what he's had to work with, first of all, and the job he believes he's done on a personal level in his first year here in Tennessee. And so here's what he had to say on that.
My very best every day in the meeting room, on the field, in development. So I'm very conscientious about that, cognizant about, the development of the player and the improvement of the player. We try to cover every aspect in line play that you can even imagine, and it's drilled. It's also discussed. It's critiqued. With the player's eyes on it. So if you were in my meeting room, you would get a pretty good idea of what you were expected to do for that particular game based on the filmage that we go through on a daily basis. I'll give you an example. An individual drill, whether it's a reach, a combination, a zone, a gap combination, that's filmed. The footwork is filmed, the strike is filmed. So when the players get in the meeting, they see exactly what they're doing on a daily basis. So you can really gauge their rate of improvement, based on the daily film, that's being obviously looked at and discussed and coached and critiqued. So that's a real positive. And so there's been a lot of things underlyingly that have been improved, but the bottom line is you got to win. And that's the business we're in, and I understand that better than anybody. You got to win. And, part of that winning is development and getting players to do the right thing on a consistent basis. So we're always striving for that consistency, always working, to be the best that we can be, So some years, you have some really good pieces, and you're working well and they're growing and they're maturing. And this year I've got a young group of guys that, you're coming in with a whole new set of techniques and tools, and a lot of guys have picked them up and have done really well with them. And then there's some other areas where everybody's got to get more improvement in. So that's what we're striving to do.
So I think that interesting, a couple of things there. One, Stoney, I don't think you were crazy to believe that, the reason why a lot of these guys have struggled, specifically MPF, it does feel like it's a whole new toolbox and
yeah,
technique wise for the guy. And as much as, he wants to say they're improving, it really does feel like as much tape as they watch, we're not seeing that much improvement from the right side. And so, it does feel like this is, an answer at least for the offensive line as a whole going forward. But like you said, like he alluded to, sometimes, you have really strong groups, and then sometimes, well, you're young. And I think that's an interesting way to get out of saying, we just don't have the answer this year. But, the way for him to continue to try to develop these guys, that's the question we asked him next. It's like, okay, so when they are watching the film here, when they're doing things like that, what development have you seen from a guy specifically like an MPF or an Isaiah Prince or a lot of these guys on the right side of the line? And here's what he had to say about that.
I think our guys, I love our guys. I mean, Nick Petit is working hard. Isaiah's working hard. Leroy's injured right now. We hope to get him back in a couple of weeks here. But all of them have done admirable in terms of work ethic and try hard and trying to do the right things. Unfortunately, we haven't had the consistency or the production that we want to have at that side, and we're working hard towards that end. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, and not only for our team, but league wide. The offensive line play it's really, really tough, demanding positionally to find five guys that are are playing at a high rate, and I think we understand that. I think the fans out there understand that. It's not like you can have 32 teams with all 5 great linemen. So we're young. We're in the first year of this program. I think there's a lot of upside in terms of what we've done with JC. His development has come along a long ways. Peter has been a guy that I looked at when I came in here as a rookie because of the time he missed last year. And then, of course, the thing that we were getting him to do with the new system. So I look at him a little bit rookie-ish in one sense, from a technical aspect, but really worked hard, has developed, has gotten better. It's too bad we lost Lloyd, but Dan Brunskill has really stepped up. And, to have a veteran of his nature and stature to come in and play that position means a great deal to our team, to our unit. He can come and ran the show, and I had that feeling when I came in that he could do that. And we needed a really solid backup and a guy like him to help Lloyd. So that was a very positive. And then Raditz has really come along. He's improved his stuff. So it's a process.
A lot to unpack there. First of all, I do like that. He goes on and gives high praise for a lot of those guys. Like the J.C. Lathams and the Skoronskis and what he's seen. MPF, he's working hard. Isaiah Prince, he's working hard. No mention of John Ojukwu, so it sounds like he has been put into witness protection, and he's gone. He's out of here. I wouldn't be surprised if whoever's in his locker right now is a body double because they shipped his ass out of here.
They have Harry Potter John Ojukwu. He is under the stairs right now somewhere.
It certainly feels like that.
Also, I would ask Bill, do the fans understand that it's hard to get 5 quality offensive linemen? Because the fans seem pretty pissed about this right tackle situation.
Yes.
I'm here for the Daniel Brunskill glazing, though. I'm here for that. Yes. I've been on that all season.
The biggest thing, though, is when he talks about it being their first year and the development of this first year going into next, which is something we continue to hear over and over again from many different position coaches, from the offensive coordinators, which makes you feel like this is where their head's at anyways. Like this, it's a developmental time. And as much as the fans want to get mad at us, like we're taking our development and trusting our certain process here, so to say. And so I think that, is really interesting, but it still begs the question, finally, after all that exposition, what's the deal with MPF? Are you seeing any improvement whatsoever on his front and any confidence, for, this Sunday, and it being one of the biggest tests right now for a guy you continue to try to develop? What exactly, how confident are you in his development right now? And so here's what he had to say to end off our Bill Callahan saga here.
Been fun, but like I said, the bottom line is got to win. I think that he's gotten more poised. He's taken a breath per se and just kind of looked at it from a different lens, and he sees himself playing differently now. You can see his demeanor, all the things that he's doing, his movement skill set is improving. But on Sunday, that's it's going to be a great challenge for us to go down to Houston to play a front that I think is probably one of the tops in the league. They do a great job. It's minimized. They don't play a lot of fronts. They just line up and rush. So
does he have enough fight in him? Does he have enough dog in him?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. He's a tough kid. He really is. He's tough mentally, tough physically. So yeah, we're hoping the best.
You can say how tough he is all you want, and you can say that his movement continues to get better, but until we see some sort of anchor come back to his game, I don't think any of that really matters, does it, Stoney?
No, I mean, I don't think his movement skills have ever really been an issue. Like, I love Bill's answer to that, because he's just like, yes, the thing that he's always done well is something that he's improving at. It's just a way of dancing around the issue here, that there is just no aspect of power to his game. So that's a seasoned vet coach right there that is just fielding the questions. Like, I feel like you could see a certain smile forming on his face. Like, he knew what he was doing and taking that question and just kind of flipping it and not really giving a definitive answer there. But you know what? His movement skills are getting better.
Hey, and you know what? This is a big test for them. We'll have to see. Maybe
is.
maybe this isn't. Maybe we're just getting gaslit right now by thinking that they're bad when actually there is development on that end, and we see a good game from them. But I don't get my hopes up. The final thing, or I guess final two things, especially on the defensive side of the ball, specifically for the Titans to really, get after Houston and see if they can win this game. I mean, there's no bigger piece right now on this Houston Texans team that you have to pay attention to than Joe Mixon. And I think that at the end of the day, it comes down to the Tennessee Titans front, and it comes down to, trying to finally command some sort of production from guys like Arden Key and Harold Landry. I mean, it really does feel weird how in the 2 weeks that, the Harold Landry and Arden Key were potential trade pieces, they looked really, really good and then have seemingly fallen off the face of the earth yet again. This was a graph I found over on PFF the other day talking about, their pass rushers grades over expectation when not versus double teams. And that's kind of like on the y-axis, and then the x-axis is the amount of times they get double teamed. And so Harold Landry right now, talking about him specifically, you look at him and the amount of times he's getting double teamed, he's around there with guys like Clennon Farrell, James Smith-Williams, David Ojabo, Azeez Ojulari, Charles Harris, Leonard Floyd, a lot of guys that, are not the cream of the crop right now and not demanding a lot of that type of attention. And so you would expect Harold Landry, a guy who signed a massive contract a couple of years ago, to maybe be able to do something with said non-double teams. Well, he's one of the bottom 3 people on this graph in the bottom left, as in he simply is not producing at a level that you would like to see. I mean, I think the only guys who are lower than him on this list in terms of grade over expectation when not versus a double team are Josh Pascal. Like, he's pretty much in line with guys like David Ojabo, Sam Hubbard. Zaven Collins is barely ahead of him, but like that's where he is right now. And so it really is seeming like it's going to be, it's wishful thinking that we can get anything out of him at this moment. Friend of the show, Zach Lyons, has always said that Harold Landry is more of a cleanup artist, and maybe he was right, maybe never wrong, just early on that one. I do think that means that it's going to have to fall on the shoulders of guys like Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat to finally get home on CJ Stroud in this running game. And so before we talk about their ability to maybe do that, here's what Jeffrey Simmons had to say. And this clip comes by way of Paul Kuharsky, talking about what Simmons believes that the Houston weaknesses are and how they can attack those.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you turn on the film, and especially if we can continue to build off last week, me and this guy next to me, we was able to dominate the inside of the pocket. That's where when you turn on the film, you see that's where kind of they struggle at. Calling it what it is, they struggle inside with protecting. So I love all matchup inside. You just got to have to go in with a mindset that we're going to dominate for 4 quarters. Not doing just the second half or first half. How can we do it for 4 quarters? And like I said, I love our matchup, but quite frankly, if you don't stop the run, you won't be able to get to that because they do a lot of things like the boots and the play action pass off their run game, which I said Joe Mixon is having his best year. Props to him. I didn't see that Joe Mixon in Cincinnati. I wish he was still in Cincinnati, but at the end of the day, he's having a hell of a year. He's running very hard. He fit their offense, and I said whatever they did to him in Houston, they're doing a hell of a job at that. But we have to be able to come in with a mindset that we need to stop the run first to be able to affect the quarterback. And so we don't be able to, if we don't stop the run early, we won't be able to affect the quarterback. So.
I think that's, I think their priorities are in line, unlike weeks prior where we had questions about what they were doing with their game plan. It really is trying to eliminate how scary Joe Mixon can be against a defense. And that that interior pressure that is going to rely on Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat, and, to an extent, Sebastian Joseph Day is going to be huge in this game. And I think that you might be able to see a lot of that because we've seen Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat, and these guys get really good interior pressure over the past couple of weeks. And I think that's a sign of, if they can continue that, it's going to make it that much harder on CJ Stroud and the rest of the Houston Texans this week, would it not?
Yeah, and it's one of those matchups, JT, that you look at, it should favor the Titans, the interior defensive line against that Texans interior offensive line. And you start to think of like the things that could spiral out of that if they were to consistently win that matchup. And it's like, okay, this is part of that path where things start getting a little frisky and maybe some magic starts to happen. And I don't mean to use such erotic terms, but feeling a little frisky, some magic starts to happen, and it ultimately leads to a Titans upset. But man, it's not just about collapsing the middle of the pocket, but CJ Stroud looks like a completely different quarterback. Like the Cowboys were able to generate pressure on him a few times last week, and he just kind of folds, like looks like a completely different quarterback. And one of the things that I don't think people realize is, like, CJ Stroud is not having the top 10 caliber quarterback season everybody thought he would have. 25th in passer rating right now, 23rd in QBR. So if you can get to him, he's going to hold on to the ball a little too long. You're going to be able to generate the pressure. If you can blow up the run gaps, then that run game's not going to be able to get going. I'm glad Jeffrey Simmons mentioned what the Texans do off of play action, because I think Bobby Slowick is doing some really creative stuff with the check downs, the screens, that sort of thing. There's a play I've got up on my Twitter where they do the play action to run the ball, which you see the play action, you see CJ Stroud tuck that ball back in, and you're thinking pass, and the Cowboys linebackers drop into coverage to play the pass, and then all he does, Stroud, is just check that ball down to Joe Mixon, who's just on the other side of the offensive lineman. You get a couple blockers in space, and it ends up being like a 36, 37-yard run. So effectively creating explosive runs with the play action, and they're really effective at that. So if you can be disciplined with your eyes at the linebacker position, it's another thing that, hey, maybe these guys aren't going to be covering Tank Dell or Nico Collins or John Mechie III down the field, but Kenneth Murray has been pretty good at see ball, get ball, heat-seeking missile, tackling the running backs. He's going to have to step up his game. These linebackers, if they're disciplined with their eyes and they don't fall for these chunk plays, these fake outs with the play action, then they should be able to tackle Joe Mixon. They just got to be ready. It's going to be one of those games where they're going to be hitting the ice bath afterwards. But that is going to be a key function in stopping this Texans offense, is being disciplined against those screens, those check downs, that sort of thing, and then getting the interior pressure to fill up the run gaps so Houston can't get that stuff going. And if you get them in situations where they have to pass, it's advantageous, because CJ Stroud just has not looked like the same quarterback under pressure. So again, all of this circles back to, there's a path for a Titans upset here.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And I think that's where we can end our discussion on how the Titans can really, put the Texans on spoiler watch. Kenneth in the comments here, before we move on to our best bets real quick, says, the main question I have, how do we tell the difference between Levis turning a corner and beating bad teams down the stretch? Don't want a Daniel Jones fool's gold situation down the road. And I would offer that maybe besides the two Jacksonville, with 7 games left, besides the 2 Jacksonville games, it feels like that's going to be 5 opportunities for him to continue this progress. Is it not to you? Like, I feel like if he comes out and continues to play the way he has in the last 2 games, twice against the Texans, against the Commanders, against the Bengals, and against, the Colts again, at the Colts, like, I feel like that, is definitely a little bit more than the fool's gold maybe of a Daniel Jones playoff season.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to consider the context in which he's already started to improve. 4 of their last 5 games, you can include this Texans one, could be considered against 4 of the 5 best defenses in the NFL. I'm not going to argue with you if you want to say the Chargers and the Vikings are the 2 best defenses in in football right now. And you think about the fact that Will Levis started to show signs of improvement, started to show that he was turning things around against those two defenses. I think that buys him, it gives him a little credit going forward. No, they're probably not going to face another defense of that caliber. Probably, you have two against the Texans, and they're obviously one of the 4 or 5 best defenses in the league too. But if he continues to do it this week, then I think, maybe we can start to have that conversation. Like, it's not fool's gold here. He is turning things, getting more comfortable against really good defenses.
Yeah, I would agree. And so I think that's where we're going to leave it. But before we get out of here on a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday, got to go through our best bets of the week this week. And Stoney, I feel like we're kind of hitting our stride a couple of weeks now where we're putting back-to-back to get like good weeks, winning weeks. I think we're hitting our stride in this very weird season. And to kick it off, I talked about how the Tennessee Titans are 1-9 against the spread to start their 1-11. So one of those, they're 1-9 again, I think, to start the season. I'm going to go with them anyways, because we just talked about them for 60 minutes. I'm taking the Titans plus 8.5 in this game for all the reasons why I think that this could be a sneaky close game, and they could, not allow the Texans to put up a lot of points. The biggest reason for me also is that Stroud, as a, I think as a favorite has really struggled in his career. He's 8-4 against the spread as an underdog and 6-10 against the spread as a favorite in his pro career. So his only time that he's close as a favorite of 7 or higher was last week against the Cowboys. And let's be honest, the Cowboys, I think, are in even more disarray than the Titans are right now. Maybe that's a hot take. Maybe, I don't know. But I mean, just from what I see, it feels like the Titans are a better put together team right now than the Cowboys are. So I want to take the Titans. They continue to burn me, but, I think we laid out a pretty compelling argument as to why they could keep it, at least to a touchdown loss this week, plus 8.5.
You froze on me there for a minute. I don't know if that was my end or your end, but I'm going to stay with this game. I'm going to stay at this game, Titans Texans. I'm going to take the over. It's currently set at a total of 40.5. I think my faith in the Titans to consistently slow down Joe Mixon is not very strong. I mean, I think they may be able to do it enough times to win this game, but I do think that the Texans are going to run the ball and he's going to score. I also think that, man, I feel like from hearing the media availabilities this week, sounds like this coaching staff understands and is prepared to hit some explosives, identifying situations where they can connect on those. I think there probably are going to be a couple more big plays in this game. And I think it's going to be one of those surprising, I'm not going to call it a shootout, but I do think it's going to be one of those like 21-24 type of games at the very least, but I won't be surprised if it does turn into a scoring frenzy either. So I'm going to stick with that one. I'm going to take the over in this game.
Yeah, I like that one. And with my next pick here, I'm going with the Denver Broncos minus 5.5. Listen, this is one I know that they are, the Raiders are a home divisional dog here, but Denver's playing very, very well right now. And listen, this is a team that I think is riding high off Bo Nix's pretty efficient play right now. And they're going up against a team who is currently tied for the lead in turnovers on offense with 20 this season. Their turnover differential of minus 15 is tied for the worst through 10 games in franchise history. This is a team that I think just really has no direction right now. And I think that this is a team, at least a game that the Denver Broncos really need to keep their playoff hopes pretty secure. And so I like to back Sean Payton to take care of business once again this week against the Raiders. So I'm taking them minus 5.5.
I love the Broncos in that one. That was, people aren't talking about Bo Nix enough. I think we need to start a Bo Nix podcast, JT. I'm going to go to New York, and the Giants are hosting the Buccaneers. The Bucs are 5.5 point favorites here. I'm going to back Tampa Bay in this spot. I just think they're the better team. I'm not buying the quarterback switch spark in this situation. The Giants feel like a mess right now. You've got like player interviews in the locker room where guys just don't seem to be backing this switch off of Daniel Jones right now. I kind of think the Giants are in shambles, and the Bucs are built in the trenches to really bully this team around. I think they're going to win this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I don't hate that one whatsoever. And with my next pick here, this is an interesting one because I was going to go with Green Bay -2.5, but since we started this episode, it has been announced that Brock Purdy and Nick Bosa both won't play this week at Green Bay. That line is now jumped to -5.5. And you know what? I'm going to stick with it. I'm on the show
There you
right
go.
here because I do believe that, what Green Bay is able to do off the bye here, or, after their big win, I guess 2 weeks ago, and now after the Chicago, this is a team that I think, still needs to win. And this is a San Francisco team that just, they had a backbreaker against the Seattle Seahawks last week. This is a team that without Brock Purdy, I think they're starting Brandon Allen this week.
Oh my!
I don't know if I really am that confident in what Brandon Allen can do. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I think this is a pretty, a Green Bay Packers team that is going to be able to take care of business, especially against a San Francisco team missing 2 of their maybe 4 top players. So I'm going to take Green Bay -5.5 now.
I'm going to go to the Bears-Vikings game in Chicago. And listen, I know that you're down bad if your offensive highlights from the week before include Rome Odunze bodying a block out of bounds. When we're talking about wide receiver blocks as offensive highlights, it's a pretty bad situation. But I still like the way that I like the potential they have to move the ball. I like the way the Vikings are playing right now. This number is sitting at 39.5. I'm going to take the over in this one. That feels like a really, really low number that I don't know that necessarily the Bears keep pace with the Vikings, but I think given how Chicago's playing right now, I'm not going to be surprised at all if this is like a 34-10 type of game either. So I think there are multiple ways that you can hit the over in a matchup like this. And when I see those, I'm taking that money. I'm taking that over.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. And with my next pick here, I'm going with Seattle to rack up back-to-back wins here, +1 against the Arizona Cardinals. They're hosting them off their bye. Kyler Murray has just not been that great against the NFC West in his career. He's 4-2-1 against the spread against the 49ers. However, he is 5-12-1 against the spread versus the Seahawks and Rams. Kyler has started 5 games career on a full bye during the season. His teams are 1-4 straight up and against the spread in those games, failing to cover the spread by 9.1 points per game. This is a Seahawks team that really needed that win last week and continues to be the more desperate team right now than the Arizona Cardinals. I like what the Seattle defense can do against Kyler Murray and shutting them down. So I'm going to take Seattle +1 this week at home.
I am going to Miami where the Dolphins host the Patriots. And listen, Mike McDaniel's got things coming together for the Miami Dolphins right now. I'm going to back them as a touchdown favorite in this game. Might seem crazy given their overall record, but I feel like they're starting to get things right. They're starting to get healthy. And Mike McDaniel's out there talking shit to Max Crosby. He's in his bag. He's feeling himself. I'm feeling you too, Mike, if you're watching right now. I'm going to back the Dolphins as a touchdown favorite in this one.
Yeah, I don't hate that one either. I like that one a lot. And with my last pick here, I'm just going to go with Philadelphia, -2.5, playing on Sunday Night Football. I do think that this is just a team that's riding high. I think that really Saquon could have himself an absolute day against this LA team. This is going to be a high explosive, a absolutely explosive matchup, high scoring game. I think the potential there for this one, but in the end, I just think Philadelphia is the better team right now, and they're playing a lot better. Jalen Hurts in 2024 this year, he's 3-1 against the spread as a road or neutral favorite, scoring 28+ points in 3 of the 4 games. I think that's going to be enough to take out this LA team, and so I'm going to take Philadelphia -2.5 with my last pick.
Man, Quinyon Mitchell is playing some really good ball as a rookie. I like that one too. I like the Eagles to overwhelm the Rams. For my last pick, I'm going to LA and I'm going to back the Chargers as a field goal underdog against the Baltimore Ravens. I feel like the Ravens have been a little erratic this season. I'm not as high on them as everyone else is. I think that LA, quite frankly, this might be a hot take, JT. I think LA is playing the Baltimore brand of football better than the Baltimore Ravens are right now. I hate the way the Chargers play football. It is so boring. but no one can argue with the results right now. They're getting it done. They are efficient. Justin Herbert looks efficient. They're running the ball. The defense is playing well. I'm going to back the Chargers here. I think this is going to be an upset that's going to open some people's eyes to this boring ass football team being maybe an actual contender in the AFC.
All righty. And so that's going to do it for our best bets this week. To recap, I am taking the Titans plus 8.5, Denver minus 5.5, Green Bay minus 5.5, Seattle plus 1, and the Eagles minus 2.5. That is 3 favorites, 2 underdogs. Stoney, you are taking Tampa Bay minus 5.5 against the Giants. Miami minus 7 versus New England, and the Chargers plus 3 against Baltimore. Also taking the over in the Titans-Texans game and the over in Vikings at Bears. And that's going to do it for the Hot Read podcast today. Thank you once again to Sinkers Beverages. Oh, one more thing. Classic
JT,
Stoney. Yes.
If I may, I had a note that I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention on Monday. I want to give Denard Wilson some credit here because I was critical of the game planning last week, and I came on here and I said, I don't expect them to play a lot of zone bracket wide receivers. They're probably just going to do what they've done all season long. I give them credit. They did play more zone. They did bracket those Vikings receivers last week, and it worked effectively. Justin Jefferson had just 81 yards. If you take out his big 31-yard reception, he averaged just 10 yards per catch. They did a fantastic job, and it was because they adjusted to the opponent. So tip of the cap to Denard Wilson. I was critical of that last week. I need to own it, hand over my heart. You got it right, buddy.
There you go. Perfect. Hey, small victories. That's what we like to celebrate with this team this year. And you know where you can go celebrate those small victories is over at our sponsor, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. Thank you once again for them for sponsoring the show. And we'll see what happens. Were we right about the Titans upsetting the Texans? Were we horribly wrong and they get blown out by 35 points? So the only way you'll find out is from us next week on Tuesday. And until then, for Stoney Keeley, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday.